a chunk of the industry in hemp are mislabeling. And they're mislabeling because they're using stock and seed as the source of their CBD on their label, which is obviously mislabeled because we know they're not using stock and seed. And so I guess CBPHE seems to be very well aware that there's a ton of mislabeling going on with CBD products that are circulating domestically right now, and that is also being discussed. So far, do I have everyone kind of on the same page about how this started and where we're at with CBPHE? Is there any questions just before I go on? Compliments, are you hearing us over there? Okay, so now let's talk about CDA. What is the CDA? Where are they at with all this? So CDA got notified as soon as I realized that there was an issue due to florist bake shops concerns. They immediately jumped on board, but they have a million things going on, of course, and this is not even the most critical, believe it or not. They started having conversations with CDPHE and the governor's office and other sources that I was hoping could resolve this issue, so we wouldn't even have to have this meeting. And then it started getting worse. And I found out the governor's office, which is Andrew Friedman, he's like the representative for the governor's office, seemed to be backing it and supporting CDPHE's new position. Let me also remind you that there are existing companies with names that we all know that have wholesale manufacturing license in place right now for both domestic and imported hemp materials. According to CDPHE, this covers not just domestic but also imported hemp materials like CBD and paste, etc. So it's not just domestic anymore, they're also talking about international ships. So CDP or CDA obviously is on the registered side. They don't agree that this should be treated like anything else other than food. And I think everyone in this room would agree the same thing, that industrial hemp is an agricultural crop, and we should be treated like food without any kind of special regulations or considerations or whatever. It's kind of like carrots. No one tells you that you can use all parts of the carrot except for the beta carotene. You could go ahead and use all parts of the carrots, but you can't use the beta carotene. That's kind of like what's almost being said right now. CBD, I know, is a very political and popular issue right now, but in hemp, it's not the only cannabinoid. So if we let CBD get controlled by another entity or group or regulated, we also are allowing our other cannabinoids and terpenes to get regulated. So please keep that in mind. It's not just about CBD. What is the solution? So CDA has been working hand in hand with CDPHE. I obviously have been talking to one of the head bosses. There was a meeting yesterday with a number of lobbyists, one from National Hemp Association, two that are with Bob Hogan, he's a cannabis attorney, and let's see, CDPHE was there, and CDA. And so basically, CDPHE is definitely working with us. They are, the person that I'm interacting with at this point is the head boss, which is who we're all interacting with that's involved. And he is definitely open and receptive. He's definitely not turning a blind eye or not trying to just be adamant this is the way it is. He's actually making a lot of effort. So I have to commend him for keeping the lines of communication open, and I do feel like it's very important for us to kind of be supportive of the state process right now. I know it's not like the best solution, and I have a hard time agreeing with anything on the state, honestly, but at this juncture in the road, if we don't work with them, there's three things that could happen. One is legislative action comes in place, which looks like that's what's going to happen, is legislative action is going to happen no matter what in order to correct this. Legislative action takes money, lobbyists, power, and a lot of stress. You know, so I don't know how many people have been through legislation sessions here, but if we do have to walk through legislative session, that means that we're all pretty much screwed till that happens. Just FYI, because that means we're still illegal with the hope of remedying it through legislative session. Second option is litigation, which litigation against a state entity or a local county or municipality is almost impossible to win because they pretty much have immunity and no one ever wins in litigation. So litigation is kind of out. Then third, we have public pressure. We have, perhaps the possibility that we can make them rescind to the original position. In my best case scenario, they just rescind to the original position they gave us and treat us like food additive, not adulterated. Is that going to happen? I don't know. It sounds like there's being a proposed possibility of a new license for industrial hemp and food through CDPHE, which means that there will be a legislative action that gives them a budget for this new license for industrial hemp food, manufacturing and wholesale. And there will be criteria and regulations around that, and a fee, of course, but it won't exactly be the same as our food wholesale manufacturing license right now. And of course, that's all in discussion right now. So this is why we're here to meet. I was hoping that we could get some insight by the different members here of what may be the most comfortable direction. And I'll be right there too. And then answer any more questions about maybe something I left out, because I've been eating and breathing this for like 2 months now, so sometimes I roll over some of the info. I know Zev, the National Hemp Association, also wanted to relay some information about the meeting I mentioned yesterday. But let me answer your question.
I was just curious, what would be the purpose or difference in creating a different type of license?
Okay, so the question was, what would be the purpose or the difference of creating like a different license for industrial hemp? Okay, so right now the CDPHE's Division of Manufacturing and Wholesale has been federally funded for this whole time, many years. It's kind of like a partnership with the federal government. And they have been federally funded. I believe it was just the last year or so that they have denied some of that federal funding and are starting to transition into their own state independent agency, in a sense, without federal regulation. So, I guess the point is two things from what I'm gathering. One is so they can have a budget to deal with it, because it's extra workload all of a sudden. And then two, I think it has to do with CBD. How do we keep consumers safe? I mean, this is a lot about consumer safety. There's a lot of snake oil salesmen going on it right now. There's a lot of mislabeling. There's not any kind of manufacturing quality controls, really. It's almost the Wild West of CBD right now. So I think a lot of it does have to do with consumer protection in the long run. But I don't necessarily agree with that separate license yet either. Zeb?
I may have missed it, but what definition are you using, or what does adulterated mean? Didn't actually get to that.
So yeah, adulterated, I put two things for reference. So on page 1, let's see. Okay, page 1 at the bottom, I put adulterated ingredients, and in parentheses means, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't state that. I just linked to it in the Colorado Pure Food and Drug Act. So I did bring that with me and I can look that up. But if you go to the last page, which is the adulterated food, this actually is only one section, and I highlighted this because there's an exception to the federal definition of adulterated, which may help us in the end. The exception is substances that are not added substances. Such foods shall not be considered adulterated. So the reason why I noted that is because my original letter, I had put specifically that all our cannabinoids that we were concentrating and extracting were naturally occurring, and we were not isolating or separating compounds apart through our concentration or extraction. It was all naturally occurring. So I was wondering if this federal exemption might work in our favor somehow.
That would be ironic.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. There is some handouts, not everyone got them, we made a few copies, but it was like page 1 to 15, 20, and 26. Pull that out if you can. Not everybody got a copy because I only made so many. It was a separate attachment. This is part of our Colorado Food and Drugs Act that I have just copied specific pages from. And let's see, I can read some to you. Okay, so in our Colorado Food and Drugs Act, this was the first thing I started studying. And there's a section in here that talks about adulterated products and that our state has the power to adopt, amend, or repeal regulations upon its own motion, including food additives, which was interesting because I was like, well, maybe you guys have the power just to do this right now without any separate license or confirmation from feds or whatever. So as I studied our own law, I was trying to discern it. I did get very concerned on page 20 in our Colorado Food and Drugs Act. There is the word cannabis and marijuana in our Colorado Food and Drugs Act. Why is this a concern? In Colorado, we regulate hemp and marijuana separately by those definitions, by those specific terms. When we lump them together in the word cannabis, it means both hemp and marijuana. So in our Colorado Food and Drugs Act, whether anyone's noticed or not yet, we do have the word marijuana and cannabis considered not acceptable ingredients. So that is kind of another.
How old is that? When was that?
This it says CSR 1973. I know, I was born in 78. On page 26, there's a number 4. And it says that, basically it says that our state can adopt food additive regulations without federal interference necessarily. Now, interpretations are always different. I'm not a lawyer here, but as I read it, it's telling me that we have power within our own state through CDPHE to do something without necessarily it going overboard or waiting for legislative action. So these things have all been proposed to the head boss at CDPHE I've been discussing with. And he's taking it really serious, and he's proposed already to different powers that be in his world. But he is kind of between a rock and a hard place. So did I answer your question about adulterated? Because there's 2 definitions, and I really think it's important for people to read the federal definition of adulterated and the consequences and penalties, as well as state. Yes?
Robbie, do you know if any prior licenses, wholesale licenses were issued by the state and how they're dealing with those companies?
Yes, so there is a number of wholesale manufacturing licenses that have been issued already for players that we know, names that you can think off right off the top of your head. And there's so that's domestic related hemp, and then there's also for imported hemp wholesale manufacturers that do have wholesale manufacturing license also. I did ask about that because CDPHE was supposed to be here today. I know it probably was a little scary to come in the line of fire. They ended up declining yesterday after the meeting, which was fine. But I did ask him what kind of enforcement, if any, would be taking place on existing licenses. I kind of got a broad answer, which I understand why, but at the same time, he did tell me that no federal enforcement is being looked at right now because all these people are shipping, obviously, so the federal would be the number 1 concern. I did know that a lot of people would feel that it was very unfair for the state to allow these existing licenses to stay in place and for a current license like Florida's Bake Shop to be denied because then it provides a monopoly. And a monopoly in the industry is not really acceptable since there's so much room and playing ground and territory for us all to benefit. So for existing licensee holders to not have any kind of consequence or business damages and new licensees to be denied, that's a concern. You know, it's because they will not fit the name.
Veronica, can you repeat the question?
Pharmaceuticals.
I'm sorry, what was that?
Well, I mean, let's talk about GW Pharmaceuticals. I mean, they're in phase 3 human trials with the FDA. And obviously, this has something to play involved with the possibility of CBD being only used as a pharmaceutical. How do you think that is interplaying with all of this? And, they have an orphan drug status, any other company, and they're a United Kingdom company. So, I mean, how do we talk in regards to big pharma coming into the industry? What do we do about it? And also with some other medicinal plant material, such as like curcumin and turmeric, how has that been, monitored in the past? Because I believe curcumin is used for the statin drugs.
Okay, so her question was, what kind of influence does GW Pharmaceutical kind of have in all this, and maybe possibly the pharmaceutical companies? How is this maybe perhaps causing us problems? Okay, well, obviously, we know GW Pharmaceutical has the right to use this government patent on CBD. We know that FDA has sent out letters saying that we can no longer make claims such as dietary supplement, cosmetic, medical, except for those who already had their product out on the market with dietary supplement on it. For example, Charlotte's Web, because they're a perfect example of that exemption. GW Pharmaceutical, maybe 3 weeks ago, was on TV, very hush-hush, talking about how they have just had some major breakthroughs with CBD and seizures that traditional medicine can't help. So that made me shiver a little bit, because I can see where that's going. Yeah.
Is that what it's called?
Which one?
The carriers, CARs, the Surgeon General did CPD off in Schedule 1. Is that change things?
I think that's David Bush in a minute. We'll get to that. But let me finish about GW Pharmaceutical. So there was also a big meeting in Poland, I believe it was, a week or two ago, where a bunch of medical professionals came. And this was a huge topic of conversation. In fact, there was one researcher there who has documented proof that CBD converts to THC. And so I'm looking up for that information on that researcher, because if that research turns out to be valid and CBD can convert to THC in the system and people are going to test hot on their UA and lose their job, who then becomes liable? So this research is a bit concerning, because our Attorney General in Colorado right now already believes that CBD converts to THC. So pharmaceutical companies, in my opinion, this is where I'm at with it, they're looking for single compounds and isolating single compounds. We are not doing that in 90% or 99% of the cases of hemp. We are doing we're doing extraction with all naturally occurring cannabinoids, compounds, and derivatives.
Except for pure CBD oil.
Well, that's isolating a single compound, and it also uses adulterated ingredients, perhaps that are through the chemistry process that are not already permitted. So when you isolate a compound, I feel like that's probably more medically, especially when claims are being made, that's a huge problem. But if we're staying on naturally occurring cannabinoids, because it's just like beta carotene is naturally occurring in carrots. So if we juice the carrots and we're getting beta carotene, this should be treated the same way for hemp. If we're juicing our hemp, extracting our hemp, we should be able to benefit from all parts of that plant. Right now, according to CBPHE, which I have on record, saying that the root, the stalk, the leaf, and the flower are all adulterated ingredients, and anything coming from them, such as CBD, except for in the contradiction you see in the letter from Flora's rejection and their lab division. Okay, you were asking me about the...
Yeah, I guess my pharmacist was just kind of explaining that the Surgeon General could take CBD off the Schedule 1 list, which I guess, I don't know if that solves the problem, because of it being classified as cannabis still, I think that's kind of
Okay, well, let's clarify first what the Controlled Substance Act is. The Controlled Substance Act is obviously the federal act that regulates drugs. Marijuana is cannabis under the CSA. Cannabis is the word that's used. That means that marijuana and hemp are lumped together under the CSA. The CSA for cannabis does one thing. It regulates THC. It doesn't care about anything else. It just cares about THC, especially for the exemption. There's exemptions in the CSA for feed and bird feed and cake, etc. But it also says not for human consumption. So even the exemptions in the CSA further define it as not for human consumption. And this, again, is for cannabis, for marijuana and hemp, only regulating the THC. So if you have a hemp product, or like if I grow hemp and it tests at non-detectable THC, the question is then, am I exempted completely because I'm not even under the CSA anymore because I have no THC, and if CSA is only regulating THC and I have none, then I completely should be exempt. Now CBD is not Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. It does have a schedule number, but it is not Schedule 1 or Schedule 2. The DEA did attempt to schedule it at one point. That's where the DEA and HIA lawsuit came in. HIA won. A lot of that was based on two things. One, the DEA trying to control and schedule CBD without the proper procedures. And two is that it's a naturally occurring cannabinoid in the hemp seed oil. So this has already been in court, these words, naturally occurring cannabinoid. I mean, everyone to tattoo that on their arm. That's how we need to start presenting our products. Like, I know CBD may be the dominant cannabinoid, and that may be the hype, but we need to start pushing the naturally occurring cannabinoids out of our instructions.
I think you just answered my question perfectly, because I was wondering if that's not on the regulated list, then
Yeah.
we'll look at level. How is that condition?
Well, THCV does not even have a number. THCV is one of the other cannabinoids that can be found, sometimes dominant, especially Wyoming saver, because I don't think away. But THCV is not technically scheduled right now, but they have the ability to schedule it if they so choose to. It's kind of weird how it operates, but right now CBD is not scheduled. Go ahead, Doug.
Right now, the VA is right on the edge of prescribing cannabis for veterans with PTSD, and also is using it to treat veterans who have had traumatic brain injuries, mild traumatic brain injuries, and mild traumatic brain injuries that have developed into chronic traumatic encephalopathy. The NFL is doing a similar research. They're actually sharing research. A group of wrestlers has recently sued the World Wrestling Federation for head injuries occurred in their sport. I happen to be one of those MTBI guys because I was with an artillery unit in Vietnam. Every time the gun went off, I got a little boom, a shockwave. And so now I look at tremors, I look at lower levels of energy, and THC helps.
Okay, but this
CBD
is,
helps.
I know, but this is one of the biggest concerns we need to address at some point, if it's not today, but down the road, is our terminology. And terminology is going to become very important in our industry because people are using the word like edibles. That is specifically a marijuana term. We cannot tie that into hemp. And so terminology, when we start saying it's medical, medicinal, when people say that their hemp is medical or medicinal, those are the people you should stay far, far away from because they're going to get us all highly regulated. They're the ones who are causing controversy with the regulatory agencies because they're like, no, look at so and so and so, and said in the newspaper that they have medical hemp. They have medicinal hemp. For some reason, this just continues. Before this issue arose, I was creating a coalition or program, I don't even know what it's called, but it was called Colorado Clean CBD Coalition. And what this was going to be was an independent group that provided some kind of regulatory structure for us to all go through in the sense of processing, farming, really for the consumer safety end. And any product would get a stamp of approval from that Colorado Clean CBD project. If they went through the proper procedures, had their stuff tested, had batch IDs, had correct labeling, so it would basically be industry standards within our industry, almost self-regulating, until this issue came up. I don't know if anyone is interested in creating or even having this discussion down the road. I have like 20 pages I've already typed up and documented of how this whole concept would work. I had conversations with Joel Stanley. He said he would be on the board. I also had it with the CEO of this amazing extraction machine, which is non-solvent. It's all vapor, which is awesome because that also helps regulatory issues. And then of course testers like RM3 Lab, they were all going to be part of this initial board, so we could write like this whole plan down. That kind of got all put on hold because, you know, Chris got denied her license. So,
It's
you
all
know,
about me.
it is all about you right now, you know, and I don't know, I don't really know the answer here. I don't know if you want to go ahead.
Any idea what's happening in Kentucky?
Say that again.
Any idea what's happening in Kentucky related to this?
Oh, okay, so Kentucky's very interesting. Kentucky continues to go back and forth with their positions. 1 minute it's legal, the next minute it's not. Remember, Kentucky only has a 5-year program. It's a 5-year research and development pilot program. There is no commercial, it's totally opposite of ours, basically. Although if you go to talk to anyone in Kentucky, they're like, yeah, we just invested $250,000 in the extraction machine and we have the best CBD in the country. But they're not even supposed to be shipping it because it's under R&D. So I really don't know what to say about Kentucky besides they flip-flop all the time. I do know that they have had better communication with our Colorado Department of Ag, because that was struggling for a long time. As far as I know, Texas, Kentucky, Oregon, and I don't think Tennessee have all, there is somebody in those states that have manufacturing wholesale license already. Because they're bringing in Colorado CBD products from hemp and manufacturing wholesaling them there in their commercial kitchens under their license. So I do know other states are allowing it too right now. But again, our state already has multiple parties with these licenses in place, and now they're denying all new ones, at least at this moment.
What are those states again that are in the manufacturing license?
I know Texas has, there's people I know in Texas with them, Kentucky, and I believe Oregon, there's at least 1 or 2 there. And then we have a plethora of them here. So the question was, who has manufacturing license in what state? Sure.
So is the issue that we won't be able to use any part of the hemp plant, or just that we need to get another license from the CDPHE?
Okay, so
Question.
the question is, can we not use any plant material, or do you just have to get a special license from CDPHE? So before today, before this issue arose, if you wanted to produce a consumable product, you would go get registered with a commercial kitchen in your local county. If you wanted to wholesale and distribute your product, you would get the license with CDPHE. That license with CDPHE is no longer accessible for those who want to use any other plant matter from hemp unless hemp seed products that are non-viable. So no, my hemp tea, I've had a hemp tea product for 4 years, it's now considered adulterated, and that just uses leaf. My hemp coffee is okay because it's using seed and coffee. Anything that is for human consumption is regulated under this division, requires this license if you want to wholesale manufacture it. And right now you cannot get that license and it's considered adulterated.
It's the same thing for dog food as well, by the way.
Yeah, dog food and I believe cosmetic stuff.
I already tried it once. It's gone.
Yes, sir.
So marijuana edibles, we know they also contain the entire entourage of cannabinoids, terpenes, everything. How do they fall under this ruling since they too contain CBD?
So they don't. So the Department of Health in Colorado does not regulate marijuana. Maybe I think only in one city the local health department regulates, which is in Denver. Otherwise, the health departments do not let you have marijuana production in your commercial kitchen. They make it under a MED license, which is under MED. So MED is manufacturer and use product license. That is the only way they can produce their infused products or foods or sell it is under that MIP through that licensing process with MED. But the food, our CDPHE or our food program, it's not the same. It's not treated as corn and carrots like hemp should be or was. Marijuana is highly regulated. It's not treated the same at all.
So it's hemp that is the problem, not the ingredients in hemp.
Well, it's all encompassing. It's encompassing hemp, raw materials, and all of the ingredients within, essentially. So if I want to extract my hemp leaf or my hemp flower, and then sell that concentrate in my tinctures, I cannot do that anymore because I just extracted material from an adulterated source. I made an adulterated ingredient and put an adulterated ingredient in a non-approved product on the consumer market. Does that make sense?
No, but thank you.
Remember, Veronica.
There's one regulating agency that says that it's okay to use CBD, being MIP. And there's one regulating agency that says that CBD is not okay. True?
Yeah.
Well,
There's something that says that's okay if you're in a mid.
Veronica, remember a question.
Marijuana shop. You can do it and it's not going to kill you. That's cool.
So there-
In this instance, hemp, cannabis, marijuana, I don't care what you call it, it's the same plant. They're using it in MIPS. They're creating infused products. Infused products, it's not food. She was really specific about that. They are not creating food. They are creating infused products.
Terminology.
It falls outside of the definition of food, so therefore the health department doesn't regulate it.
yes,
Cookies are not food if they come from the dispensary.
correct.
So I could make this cookie with concrete.
And sell it as a
And it's not
dispensary.
adulterated.
No, that would be through the health department. If you were selling cookies with concrete in it, that would still go under our regulatory authority for food. Now, if you put marijuana in it, that would go under the marijuana authority.
And you can sell it and eat it and it's fine and it's not
Yes.
going to kill you. In that
Okay.
instance.
So basically, there can be no extraction from the hemp plant.
Okay, so the question was, can there be no extraction from the hemp plant? So, I'm not going to be the one to say yes to that. I continue to extract, and I believe that we should continue to go on as business as normal with some understandings that there is regulation coming down. We need to be proactive. We need to understand exactly what is going on and be involved in the process so our voices can be heard, whether that's through Grow Hemp Colorado. We are not an association, we're an open source website ran by a department with huge traffic and a lot of different political pull, but we're not an association. Or if you decide to work with an association or attorney or lobbyist, whatever, I'm just hoping we all have the same message so we can get the end result as we so desire, which is really to have hemp treated back as food. It's not very complicated, honestly. It should be pretty simple. Now, let's talk about processors. Processors have no legal protection at all. So the only people who have legal protection under our state law currently are registered farmers and the registered areas. The Attorney General in our state, and many other conversations that I've went on, have a clear understanding that once hemp, even at 0.3, is concentrated, there's a window of concentration that exceeds 0.3. And this is then considered marijuana when it's above 0.3. So for example, if you are a mobile processor and you go to come to my farm and I say, I want you to run 500 pounds of material for me, but while you're running it, it hits 1%. You are now processing me marijuana, and you're also giving me back possession of the marijuana. Now, the weird thing is, if I processed it myself on site and then diluted it, I'm safer than the person who I just hired to come process for me. So technically, processors have no legal protection. They have no legal protection under our Amendment 64. They have no protection under 196, which is our Senate bill that passed 2 years ago. And they have no legal protection with multiple district attorneys who consider anything over 0.3 marijuana. Yes?
Do you think there's any protection afforded by being on your site?
Oh, well, so my advice to some processors have been the best thing to do is register with the CDA. So then all of a sudden you have a registered protected area. You are protected from prosecution on a civil and criminal level through 196. Really, it's the registration that's protecting us. I don't see any other way for a processor to be protected. Part of the Colorado Clean CBD initiative is going to be defining processing standards, such as how the processor safeguards themselves. So if I bring in 10 pounds of material, I need the processor to see my test that shows 0.3 or below, and then they need to be able to remove or dilute the THC. So the next question would be, if you remove the THC, where is the THC going? I said, bring it to me. They said no. And I was like, okay. So we talked about how to dispose of the THC that would eventually be separated. No one has that solution yet. you know, these are all things that we gotta figure out.
Veronica, for
Remember the question.
the program would it be that you're talking about the coalition, would it be inclusive of products brought in from outside the US?
Okay, so the question is, with the Colorado Clean CBD program, would it just be specific to products brought imported?
Would include.
Would it include just products imported, or also include? Would it also include products? Yes. I mean, I think anything going to the consumer through Colorado operations, we need to have a standard. Once we set the standard here in Colorado, the rest of the states will look at these standards. And if we can get our state departments to agree with these standards, that would be very helpful. I also think we need a test pledge. Canada has a test pledge for hemp press seed oil or the products that are imported in here. The test pledge is already there. We just need to copy and paste it and put our own language in it. And everybody who is making products out of hemp do a test pledge. Now this only incorporates hemp oil products right now, or hemp seed products right now imported. But this could include other stuff. We just are kind of like the Wild West with no direction in a sense, but we also don't want a bunch of regulation. Hold on, let me get to her. Go ahead.
How are some other countries handling this issue?
How are other countries handling this issue? Well, Canada does not allow their farmers to extract CBD unless it's under certain regulatory provisions, I believe. Even in their own law, it says that the farmers are not allowed to use the stock to extract CBD. They don't ship leaf over here. You know, Canada are the king of hemp seed oil and hemp parts. Maybe not for much longer, but right now they are. So, Europe, well, that's where we get all the imported stuff from, is Europe. China.
Well, let's talk about Europe for a minute.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how do they go about it? And of course, the United Kingdom has only allowed GW Pharmaceuticals as the only company in the UK to do it. So.
UK has limited amount of licenses to begin with, so it's already kind of a cartel.
Yeah, I mean, basically in Canada and Europe, they definitely have requirements of who can grow and what can be grown. So you can only grow certified seed in Canada. Eventually that will be here in Colorado, America too. That's why Colorado has the first seed certified program going, because once USDA takes over hemp, they may only allow certified seeds to be grown. And so like in Canada, if you want to grow hemp, you have to only acquire certified seed. You cannot sell that seed, and you have to, in most cases, from what I understand, have a sales contract in place already. So it's not like you can just do anything with it. Europe, same thing with certified seed, except for everything I've seen come from Europe has a test and passes that 1% THC. I mean, I've never even seen anything from Europe come in here at 0.3. It's always been 1% under and pass. So they seem to even have a higher threshold somehow, but they don't. I believe they're more restrictive, but somehow it's crossing the borders with a 1% pass on THC. Maybe something to do with our treaties in the CSA. In the CSA, there's a whole section on treaties. It has to do with importing, not for Native American treaties, because they still can't grow hemp, FYI, unless they're in a state that can. Okay, so any other questions? Will everyone put a yes, ma'am?
Could you tell me the name of the government official that you're talking to that's actually doing a pretty good job of it? Give me his name again.
I mean, I didn't give anyone his name at this point at all. I'm concerned. This is, okay, so a lot of people took issue of how I addressed this meeting, period. Grow Hemp Colorado has never had a non-important related meeting. We've never had an emergency meeting. So for me to have an emergency meeting in the growing season is important. There was a lot of animosity regarding how I presented this meeting because I didn't fully disclose all the information in the beginning, and there was good reason why. Because there was already top officials involved that could make more progress and all this put together. But as soon as that didn't happen and we were kind of getting roadblocked, I announced that we need to have this meeting so we could all get together and start understanding what's going on. Since that meeting was announced, again, there was some action by National Hemp Association and Bob Hogan yesterday, which is helping move things forward because CBPHE is knowing now this is serious. It's not just Veronica anymore, it's not just CBA anymore, it's not just Chris anymore. There's other big guns coming in. So how do we as an industry address it. When I mentioned the idea of a vote, I guess I didn't think totally through that, because I just thought we could all raise our hand and we could conclude, you know, where the best direction is, whether that's a letter we all sign so CDPHE knows our position that we all support, or do we just all agree that we're going to go in our own directions and cover our own butts? You know, that's what the vote was really for, was for us to find a direction, not some other things that have come up about the vote. So,
I think with some of that, I think everyone needs to do a little bit more thinking and research on all of those. And I think it needs to be separated out. You know, if I'm producing high CBD hemp to sell to manufacturers that are extracting just CBD oil, you know, that's going to be a whole different ballpark than someone who wants to juice hemp leaves, you know?
yeah, but the concern is, do we really want to start differentiating regulatory issues based on our cannabinoids? Because it may be CBD today, but what happens when THCV is the new popular thing, and they want to regulate that?
I guess what I'm saying is that isolation, you know,
Right.
what you're saying, because that is falling closer to the medical ballpark. There is medical ballpark, and that is what they're trying to regulate. So I think if we can make that clear separation, and then, you know, I would love to say CBD oil should be used as a dietary supplement like fish oil.
We can't use that word.
Well, but I'm expressing. You know, but
Food additive.
that needs to be, you know, maybe the concentration needs to be addressed. I mean, I think of like ibuprofen. You can buy ibuprofen over the counter, or you can get a prescription of, you know, a heavy dose of.
Yeah, but we don't want CBD to be looked at. As soon as they start looking at it's having an alteration on the human being,
They've already done it.
I understand that CDPHE is saying that it's not safe for human consumption, but in the second breath, they're saying that CBD is under the regulatory guidelines if it's from hemp press seed oil. So I guess my conclusion with CDPHE is we are making progress, like the people involved are making progress. The good thing, we have somebody who is the head of this whole issue at CDPHE who is totally hearing all of us, who is open and receptive to information, has been actually working really hard the last few weeks to try to make some progress. So we're not at the end of the road. Are we currently producing illegal products? Yes. Now for sure. Are they always going to be illegal at a state level? Probably not. Are they illegal at federal? Yes, but we already all know that. How do we pursue it? Do we agree down the road that they can do a different license for industrial hemp so we're not exactly classified as food anymore? Or do we fight for the fact for them to retract back to the original position where we're a food additive, non-adulterated, and treated like produce or herb? That would be my preference. Although I don't even know if that's realistic. We might have to compromise. So right now, I think it is a good idea for everyone to kind of dive in deep and get the information and really understand adulterated, come up with terminology for our industry, you know, and stay on the same page. Because if we all have the same message being repeated to these other government entities, we'll have more traction that way. Yeah.
So I completely agree with what you said about litigation.
Louder.
It's not going to go. So if lawyers can contact that issue, use that like you said, a system like the program you were talking about, or is it going to go much time in process? Obviously, but if you reach out, questions.
Well, yeah, so the question is, like, what's the best approach to piss them off or work with them, essentially? So I'm a little aggressive, if you know me. I'm pure fire, born on 420. I try to tone it down. I'm certainly not the most politically correct person at all in this room whatsoever. But I do feel like the lines of communication are super open, and if they can't be open with me, they're even going to be more open with some of the other people. I feel like it's important for us to try to work with them and give them a little leeway right now. I hate to even say that because I usually say, no, screw them, they need to go back to their original position. But we're kind of in a rock and a hard place right now, and so are they. So I think giving them a little bit of time to try to figure it out. We continue on with our business, but in the meanwhile, we maybe get a letter that we all can agree to, where all our signatures are on, saying this is the position our industry takes, this is what we would like to see happen, and we all sign it. That would be a very easy step, bringing the press into it without being negative towards CDPHE. I think we should show a good, consolidated front without attacking the state agency. Marijuana has attacked CBPHG over the many, many years. I don't want to be like the marijuana industry. I want to be the hemp industry that is willing to compromise to some degree, but also work together with some allowances. I do think we have those things on our side, and maybe having more meetings. Maybe if people are interested in talking about Colorado Clean CBD project again, I'd be happy to distribute that information. You guys could all put your input in, and we can see if we can evolve something. I don't have the solution right now.
So we got a couple questions coming in from Colorado
Okay,
Springs.
Implements is asking some questions.
But in the interim, you were talking about being proactive. Do you know of any good or any services or avenues that we can pursue right now that will allow us to go ahead and market our products while we're still dealing with the ongoing situation?
Oh yeah, Grow Hemp Colorado has free opportunities for the hemp farmers like Hemp's List. There's a lot of other things coming out, I think, that are trying to promote the hemp farmers. I think interstate and interstate commerce is really important. We need to keep pushing that, because if we back down, we just give them much more leverage to shut us down. If we make it kind of so big that they can't do anything, that may help us in the end. Again, it's not legal advice.
Follow up.
Yes.
Do you think that they'll need a sort of threat or some sort of possibility of a threat before they become aware of what their position is and the clarity therein?
I think threatening is probably the worst direction at this
No.
point.
That they're aware of a possible threat, where those avenues are no longer the mainstream.
He's asking if CDPHG is aware of the possible threat.
Of just disintermediation from traditional forms of commerce through this avenue.
If they're aware of intermediary
So,
commerce options.
Yeah, well, okay, so I was going to
Right.
ask, just the same way that like brick and mortars were disintermediated through e-commerce, do you think they're also aware of the fact that this can go ahead and sort of migrate into that level as well?
Oh, they already know it. They know this is being shipped everywhere. They know it's being mislabeled. They know there's hot material. They know the concentrations are over 0.3. They seem to know way more than I originally thought they did. So they're getting some information, I'm not sure from who, and a lot of it is true. There's no fact doubting the fact that the female-only growers, the non-pollinated hemp growers, are definitely kind of more problematic than the traditional hemp farmers that are pollinating. What are the questions from Hemplements?
We're waiting.
Okay.
That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Just to give
Yeah,
some.
let me know. Now, it would be helpful if anyone knew an expert in the food and drug laws. If there's anyone who knows anyone that knows somebody that's an expert in the food and drug laws, because I've been studying the state and the federal, and I see that there's avenues we could take, but I need someone, or we need someone who lives this stuff. Yes.
What lawyers have been involved with regarding this issue?
So far, Bob Hoban yesterday, and then Mitch at the CDA. I forget his last name. He's one of the attorneys at the CDA. And then I believe David Bush has been also interacting. Again, everyone kind of was playing catch up recently because I didn't release any information.
Sorry, guys. Just
So
trying to type and do all this at the same time.
On Sunday and Monday. But yeah, that's where everyone's at right now. Yes, ma'am.
Is it a concern that hemp plants sequesters heavy metals from the ground? Is that a concern of the state?
They haven't even thought about that yet, I don't think.
That's not even crossed their mind.
No.
That's a big concern to me.
It is a big concern. I've seen a lot of heavy metal toxicity issues in people with compromised immune systems that are taking imported CBD. Now, again, this should not be medical or medicinal, but people who are taking imported CBD, I've noticed, that are heavy metal based, are having some kind of a reaction.
Well, I'm wondering if that's the state's problem, if that's the state's concerned about it, but they haven't even said anything about it. All right, well, it should be, but it should be.
Yeah.
It should be something that we test for.
Well,
A lot of it's grown in the ground.
I agree, and I think that these are things they really haven't even wrapped in their mind yet, and part of it is going to be on the industry. If we can kind of self-regulate ourselves and come up with a recipe of A, B, and C, processors, farmers, consumers, labels. If we just have it in black and white, we can all follow it. Half of it is already there in the good manufacturing practices.
We have a system that everything can be put
Yeah, he's saying everything would have to be third-party tested by a designated facility, and that would be part of, like, the Colorado Clean CBD Coalition program, is that you would have to get each batch ID'd and tested with a metric tag through a state-approved lab. But again, these are all things that were just like kind of coming up before all this issue happened. And now that there's been a first denial officially, you can all read it in black and white. What happens to all the other producers that want to, at the end of harvest, with all this new material coming out, that can't wholesale manufacture? I'm so sorry. Have you been raising your hand for a long time?
Not for a while.
Okay.
I'm curious, do you have any sense for how the governor's office debate how they're viewing this situation, positively, negatively, neutral at the moment, just watching it? The reason I ask is the governor has long-term visions about the economic stability of the state. We're losing 100,000 energy jobs, negative $15 billion impact to the economy. His office is pressuring CDPHE to work with the industry to find a solution for a growing industry that's going to replace jobs, have a positive economic impact. That's a liaison for dialogue that, in my experience, is very helpful.
I agree. And this question was, does the governor support, where's the governor's office position with CDPHE's position? That was the question. You know, the governor's office has been well aware that certain counties, the first one being Pueblo County, put a ban for pollen in to protect marijuana tax monies. And the governor's office and the attorney general has done zero. And that is a violation of our constitutional rights, what's already in there, and precedes agricultural law within the state that is controlled by CDA. So I think the governor's office seems to be supporting CDPHE's new position. I have not sat with the governor's office. The person in charge of the governor's office for marijuana and hemp is Andrew Freeman. So, you know, I can tell you the Attorney General of Colorado doesn't like marijuana or hemp. And they would love to see that go in conflict and put it in court to stop both programs. But that's a whole different issue. Seth, did you want to do your little update? You can come up here. Zev with National Hemp Association, he's going to give just a little update more than for yesterday's meeting.
Can you take over real quick? We're waiting for questions.
Thank you, Veronica. I appreciate it. And I also want to really thank Veronica for the role she plays in the industry. I kind of consider her to be kind of a canary in the coal mine. She often is the one who says stuff first before most of us are even aware of it at all. So thank you for that. As she mentioned, the National Hemp Association, we have a political director, Samantha Walsh, who's on our board, and she and Bob Hoban, who I heard might be calling in, met with representatives from CDA and CDPHE yesterday, and she posted a short little item on Facebook, and I'm going to read that because I don't know how many of you have seen it, and then there's a little bit of a kind of more crafted version out there on the table, and hopefully some of you picked that up. That really is our current stance at this point. And Veronica's absolutely right. This is a moving target. We're in conversation. Things are happening. Nothing is finalized. You did get denied. That's a big deal, and we need to make sure that that gets fixed and that no one else gets denied. So let me just read this. It's just 3 paragraphs. We met with the CDPHE and CDA today. They're still in the process of working with federal partners to fully understand their concerns and how those relate to Colorado-produced food that contains hemp. Where we are currently is that industrial hemp seed, 0.3% THC or less, and any related oil, flour, etc. from the seed is fine to use in food products. We are still working on a larger question whether the oil from other hemp plant parts, the CBD, or microgreens can be utilized and passed forward for those desired options. What they seem to be hung up on currently is the status of hemp extracts from non-seed parts of the plant, and if that qualifies as food. We're hung up on what the term adulterant means and deleterious ingredients. FDA is considering that CBD and other cannabinoids are adulterants and are referring, we suspect none of this has been officially articulated by FDA, to the CDA, and that CBD is covered under that. NHA, however, respectfully disagrees with that assessment. We feel that categorizing CBD as a controlled substance falls outside their authority and is in direct contradiction to the Ninth Circuit Court ruling. which wouldn't matter anyways because Colorado has exempted itself from the CSA, so our regulatory agencies shouldn't be using it as a basis for enforcement when it comes to cannabis. Not to mention that even the FDA isn't enforcing the adulterant language on a federal level when it comes to CBD. They allow for hemp food products marked as CBD food products to be imported from China and the EU and Canada, the hemp paste that some CBD companies extract from, and the only recalls of CBD products that have been done have all been under the guise of labeling malpractice and claims of medicinal benefits. So, as it stands, we feel, though not yet confirmed, that as long as hemp food companies continue to comply with the general food safety guidelines, get a GMP, labeling regs, etc., they should be fine. We're seeking a position of discretionary enforcement from CDPHE until we delve further into the issue. They will likely have to be legislative and statutory fixes. As Veronica mentioned, there will be legislation that will come up next year. But we will seek one that safeguards the industry as it is operating now and offers the state guidelines in enforcement and regulation, as well as protection from federal interference. In the meantime, NHA is continuing its work on industry food standards, manufacturing and processing standards, cultivation and agricultural standards, etc. As CDPHE acknowledges, that would be most helpful and beneficial to them as well as to the industry. It's critical that we learn from our sister industries' mistakes and get out in front of this issue with responsible self-regulation. And to that point, we are in the process of putting together a number of committees that will have one of our board members and then a number of members of the association to help generate these standards that we can then present to the industry and to other associations and agencies so that we can be out front of it and become a self-regulatory agency, which certainly benefits all of us. Thank you.
Okay, and I just want to make a note again, and I appreciate you, Zeb, coming up here, that if there is boards created through the association, that will exclude some people like myself, because I'm not part of an association and don't plan on being. I do support certain efforts being done by that, and I'm happy to collaborate, but I just want to make sure that National Hemp Association doesn't exclude other voices that are not members. You know, because we're not all members of the National Hemp Association, and I think that everybody wants some kind of input since we're all stakeholders. So I just want to take some reassurance for that. Grow Hemp Colorado obviously will be posting information up. I think there will be a consensus between the Grow Hemp Colorado, National Hemp Association, and some of the other people involved that we're going to try to come out with the same message and keep it consistent so we show a united front. We can keep the bickering and the stuff behind closed doors, which we do well already, kind of, and then we just pursue things forward. Again, if you guys or National Hemp Association is interested in looking at the Colorado Clean CBD stuff that I've already kind of come up with, I'm happy to pass that around for input so we can all put our 2 cents into it if that helps. And we can start addressing that maybe perhaps next month and start reassuring CDPHE that we're being proactive and we're all on top of it and this is the input. And I think as long as we communicate with them and keep it consistent communication and not get that door closed on us, hopefully we will make some progress. I worry about legislative session happening because I really don't want that to happen. I would rather find a way to create a food additive or something that's not adulterated by definition in our own state law without having to do legislative action. That's my opinion. So I guess I don't want to take too much more of everybody's time unless there's any other questions. I think that if we do want to make some kind of conclusion for this meeting, whether it's, to just go home and read more or to get a letter together that circulates to everybody that we all sign, go ahead.
I'd just like to say, I think if anyone chooses to take it upon themselves to contact any of the other organizations, please keep it friendly and inclusive. I don't want to hear about people being angry.
Yeah, anger is not going to help us right now. Exactly. I mean, do you guys want to get a letter together that we all sign, that everyone can agree to, that may take a week or 2 to get the language? I mean, should we do a vote? Is that too cheesy? I mean, does everyone want to get a letter and sign it? I say everyone who wants to do that, show me your hand so I can work on it.
I say we all spent time and energy to get up here. We need to be represented in some way. You guys should be proud of yourselves for taking the time out of your day to do this. And I say, yeah, we absolutely do. I really think something in writing that says we came here, we talked about this, and this is what we
thing.
Okay, that's what I told them we would do. CDPHE, yes, ma'am.
So, but this letter, you said you were drafted or whatnot, should we have a lawyer draft it?
I mean, I tend to educate the lawyers right now, but I mean, whatever you guys feel comfortable with. I am not the spelling queen. I'm like the worst grammatical person in the world. I don't want to be in charge of submitting a letter non-proof. I'm happy to like put the bases together.
Yeah, because I just figured that's going to be a written document
Exactly.
that they can use against us. So for us to
Exactly.
be very clear on that terminology and how we're framing stuff, we don't want to screw ourselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, what do you guys think about the letter and the terminology attachment so they can be on the same page with us and we on the same page? Yes.
Personally, I love that. I was just going to volunteer that. I would have a true copy of it. I would pay for that to be all done.
Okay, perfect. Someone's volunteered to pay. Woo-hoo! Yeah! Okay. I think that you should also talk to Bob. Bob is supposed to go at 1:30, but my boyfriend, who has my cell phone, and he's not even in the room right now. So I don't even know what happened to Bob. Sorry, Bob. But I think it would be good to talk to him. Because again, I think if we come up with a letter that we all are consensus under, or repeat the same message no matter where we're at, they have no choice but to repeat that same message, and they know they have to come against all of us if they want something different. And we're a little scary when we're all together in unity. Yes, Dad?
It's like the Revolutionary War. Either we hang separately or we hang together.
Yeah.
I'm not hanging together. That's my motto now. I'll fight to the end. I'm built for that. So I do want to try to get Chris her license. Now, one of the possible solutions may be that they might let us have, if we have a designated kitchen for our production for the hemp foods, and it's not a mixed kitchen, that may be something they're also discussing. So if you guys want to, if everyone signed up on Grow Hemp Colorado, National Hemp Association, everywhere you can get a newsletter, this letter will be put together in the next 1 to 2 weeks with the terminology sheet, the definitions.
Where'd the pink sign-up sheet go?
Pink sign-up sheet. There's a pink sign-up sheet somewhere.
Is it a pink clipboard?
All right, anybody have any last minute questions? I'm sure you'll come up with some. And then David Bush also has some good information I'll be posting on the website about a senator in another state, I think, trying to get CBD removed from the controlled substance.
Okay, and Veronica.
Colorado Springs question.
I have some goodies here. It's a little giveaway. So don't leave yet. 1 second. Just find the sign-up sheet.
I'm the contact person. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I have a suggestion to make.
Sure. He has a suggestion.
I'm not part of this industry,
He's
but
not part of
I
it.
have an idea that I try to propose
Sure.
Did
whenever.
everybody sign up on the sheet? No.
Someone's proposing a possible solution.
Well, not necessarily.
Idea, suggestion.
Peripheral idea,
All right, anybody
suggestion.
else? Anybody else?
Here.
Okay.
So, I'm not involved with this industry. I, in fact, have a head injury and PTSD, and I'm always looking for help for my own issues. But I also have an MBA, and I've been watching this evolve over time. So I had an idea for a while about a philanthropic endeavor for the hemp/cannabis industry to help fund retreat centers aligning themselves with alternative health practitioners. Let's say, starting with veterans with PTSD, a dedicated place where veterans could go and have the opportunity to try alternative health things, including cannabis, including CBD, that would help support and sponsor like acupuncturists and naturopaths and other alternative people funded by the hemp cannabis industry as a way of improving the industry's image as being aligned with alternative health.
I mean, I think that's something great to look at down the road. I think we have some basic things we gotta figure out first, but that's a beautiful vision. I'll probably be at that clinic one day.
So, I mean, if anybody here is...
Yes, thank you guys, and just so you know, I'll be sending, if you guys are interested, our post the Colorado Clean CBD thing that I worked on for you to read if you guys are interested. But thanks, everybody. Go back to your farm or your processing. Don't stop business yet. Thank you, everybody. Please also feel free to email me with your ideas or call me with questions if they come up or have some crazy epiphany.
All right, Colorado Springs. Hopefully that answered all of your questions. And if you don't, you can go ahead and reach me at the mobile phone. But otherwise, I'm going to conclude the stream for today. All right, thanks, guys.